Welcome everybody to the science outreach course that we are doing here at CDU as part of Inspire NT. Inspire NT is the organization that organizes Science Week and all the science outreach activities through the year. This is part of a course for undergrad students here as a science outreach placement unit, but it's also open to anybody. This is our first talk, and if you come, we'll have one talk every Monday. If you come to 10 talks, you're going to get Inspired NT certificate on science outreach. And we're going to have awesome talks from different people from different backgrounds that have been working with outreach. And the idea is that we are going to share experiences in different areas on what works and what doesn't. And I think especially for a lot of PhD students that I know are going to be watching this later and are also watching through Zoom and other science outreach providers, this is a great opportunity to share experiences. So the talks, we have here for 4:30 to 5:30, but the talks are usually going to be around 20-30 minutes with open spaces for questions. Then we open the floor for questions and also for comments and suggestions. So remember, this is very important. This is for the community to learn more about science outreach, but also for the students here. We have lots of students trying to learn. They want to just start getting getting their head around how they can go out there and promote their science. So this is a very fantastic opportunity, and I think all the speakers that had accepted to be our first speakers for our science outreach course, and hopefully this is something that we will keep going for the next few years through Inspire NT. So our first guest speaker today is Susanne Casanova. And Susanne works for the Territorial Natural Resource Management. I met her because she kind of found me when I was a researcher and she needed someone to work with turtles and work with the community. So Susanne has a very interesting and important role on connecting scientists with people in the rural areas and communities. And she has learned a lot by watching people doing and seeing what works, what doesn't work. And I asked her to come here as our first speaker to share her experience, because at least with me, it worked really well. I went to the communities and I worked with turtles and I had the best time. And I managed to actually, she created a pathway for me to get my information to the communities and to work together towards a project with long-necked turtles. So no, I don't think there's any more introduction than that. Susanne Casanova, come here. Just put this on your thing. So yeah, so people can hear you.
Okay, thanks, Carla. I feel like I'm a little bit underqualified for this because I didn't even know what outreach was. I had to Google it. But basically, my role working with Territorial Natural Resource Management and Territorial Natural Resource Management as an organisation, I think probably if you had to sum it up, we're trying to support people to solve problems which are to do with resource management. So there's some really general themes with what we do. We are basically working in the Northern Territory. There are other parallel probably groups around other parts of the country, but we're the only one in the NT. And we work as a not-for-profit, we're independent, we're a member-based organisation, so different pastoral groups, industry groups, different even just pastoral properties by themselves, ranger groups can all join our organisation. It doesn't cost anything, but the idea is that then we're all talking the same network, and when information needs to get transferred, it can get transferred quite easily. Yeah, so basically an interest in natural resource management. What is natural resource management? Well, depending on where you come from, it could be anything related to, I guess, the environment. What we tend to break it into is natural assets from the environment. So you can talk about, clean water, you can talk about soils, you can talk about timber, you could talk about native animals, you could talk about threats then that are to those things. So you might have inappropriate fire is threatening your native animals, or you might have feral animals are threatening your soil and erosion quality. So we sort of go, natural resources are things that we want to be able to use, but we also have to use them wisely, otherwise there won't be enough or they'll get degraded. There's a bit of a framework with the organisation, and you may have seen something called a natural resource management plan for the NT. We have 5-year plans which are made by...
How are you going? Quick question there. When you change the slides aren't changing on the screen for the people on the webinar?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do I need to be...
Oh, are you...
I was doing it here.
Can you see it now?
Is that a change for you?
It's probably best if you actually put it in presentation mode so that you can actually see the entire slide, because I can see the left-hand tiles and the slide.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah, so if you go enable editing, then it might actually do its job properly. Click enable editing.
Yep, gotcha. All right, let's give this a go.
Now put it in presentation mode. Yeah, close that. Yeah, there we go. Looking good. Thank you.
You're good now? All right, sorry about that.
Thank you.
No worries.
So that's the previous slide. Didn't tell you much. Okay, so just in summary, there's our NRM plan. It's up for review shortly. And the idea is that many of those different stakeholders are coming together to talk about what are the things that are priorities, what needs looking after better, what's going well, how do we raise the profile of things that might be getting missed through local government priorities or even federal government priorities. That's the plan. Then as well as that, we have an annual conference, which is a way to bring people together once a year for about 3 days. And then we run through a bunch of things where we might want to share information. So they might be workshop based. People might want to share their own stories, so give presentations on presentation day. And as part of that, we actually also have our annual awards, which go towards different categories that we want to draw attention to. So it might be research and innovation. It might be Indigenous knowledge. There's different aspects of managing resources, and we try to cover a bunch of those different ones and raise the profile of them and what people are doing in that space. Now, my own role is as a project officer, and that's a project which is funded through the National Landcare Program Phase 2 at the moment. And then those projects themselves have quite a lot of planning that's been undertaken as part of the project. So it might be participatory planning, where you bring the stakeholders for your project area together and work out where the priorities sit for those people and how do we get good bang for buck with the money that needs to be spent in that area, getting people to work together or aligning what might already be happening with in this area with something that's happening over here, but there's a gap in the middle. So trying to tie together based on what people tell us. And then after we have heard what people think, then it's up to us to work out how do we provide the support, how do we provide the resources which meet those gaps that those people have told us about. So when I look at it, I would probably say everything starts with a problem that needs solving, and we're getting those messages about the problems from our stakeholders. So we have to be able to listen and be able to be in an open and transparent kind of space where people can come and tell us what is the thing that they care about without being worried that they're maybe treading on toes with other organisations or government or you know, worried about their own position for having that point of view. Generally, I divide things into, in my own area, it's problems with fire, it's problems with weeds, and it's problems with feral animals. Those seem to be really 3 strong themes that nearly anybody who manages land has issues with those 3. That's from my own project point of view, but other people who work in our organisation are focused more on threatened species or focused more on pastoral areas. My work specifically at the moment is largely with Indigenous ranger groups. So this whole presentation is probably from a perspective of trying to engage and work with Indigenous rangers. So after people have said there's a problem, we talk about how can we move forward, and bringing people into the same space to talk about it is key, because when you talk about it in isolation or in silos with people, you might be finding that everybody's saying exactly the same thing, but they don't know. And so they might be pointing the finger or trying to blame somebody else, when in actual fact, everybody's having the same experience about it. So get them all in the same room if you can, and then try to tease it apart. What ideas do people have about how we might be able to solve different aspects of it? And problems have many, many arms and legs. Problems might be not enough money to do this, or there was a great program happening and then suddenly it stopped, or actually we don't know enough information. We don't know enough about the sandstone heath. We don't know how big the patches of heath are. We don't know what happens when you burn them every, you know, once every 5 years, once every 10 years, once every 20 years. We don't know. So sometimes there's just no knowledge. And then I guess, like in Carla's experience, it's up to me to work out how do we bring that knowledge in to the planning process? How do we bring in some information that people can trust? And if there is no information, how do we set up a way to get that information? Now, part of our, let's call it outreach, even though I probably wouldn't have immediately thought of it as that, part of it is creating space so that those stakeholders can share their own ideas. You might find that this group who work on the left are some of the ladies from Bullman. And so for those guys, a really high priority is keeping gamba grass out of their country, massive priority, because if that gamba grass got into that country, they wouldn't have the capacity. The country is so big and so widespread, they wouldn't have the capacity to follow it up probably, for, you know, after a few years of it being established in there. They've got to keep it out. That's the number one goal of their work. And then they're telling us, how are they doing it? What are they doing? They, in this case, they got a bunch of their rangers together, sent them off to Bachelor, got the bushfires mob in Bachelor to show them this is what a gamba fire looks like. They lit it up on the edge of the airstrip so that the rangers could see what it felt like. They got the water bomber to come in and fly over the top of them and put the water down so you could see like what the effort would actually be to address that if you had gamba grass, if you had the gamba grass fire. Then they had, I think they had advertisements or stories in language on their local radio station that those rangers gave the information for, which were then spoken by a traditional lady who could explain more broadly, here's what the rangers saw when they went to Bachelor. This is why all of us, not just the rangers, but all of us in community need to be paying attention to what's happening further afield so it doesn't come and affect us. And there's definitely been a shift, I would say. I started working with TNRM about 6 years ago, and we would find it very, very difficult to get rangers to stand up on stage and talk about the work that they were doing on our presentation day for our conference. But more and more, there are people up there sharing their stories. And I think, especially working in Indigenous circles, if you're trying to create change or raise the profile of an issue, getting another Indigenous group to talk about it is the number one way to get, okay, so that's important for those guys, it's probably going to be important for us. It's not just a white fella telling people this is what you should do. It's a group saying this is what we've been doing, and you know, this is the point we've got to. These are the gains that we've made. This is also us. We're, I guess, trying to do our best to follow what are priorities, and some groups are great at putting their work on Facebook. So when I need to know what the Arjimal guys are up to, I look at their Facebook. how many cars have they towed out of wet bogs this week? How many, you know, mimosa plants have they gone and treated? How many patches of gamba did they find on the roadside? So some of them share their own information that way. In other cases, we might send out surveys, or we might need to specifically talk to people and say, hey, what's a priority for you guys at the moment? Pick up the phone, talk at conference time, take a visit, organise a meeting. The photo at the bottom is one of the Bachelor Finis Reynolds group meetings, just bringing all the stakeholders from the surrounding properties in, or as many as are interested, and working out where we need to put our resources. If it's talking about trying to manage a weed that at catchment scale spreads, then we need to have those people from top and bottom and middle of the catchment all in the same place if we can, and work out who thinks the issue starts where, and then how do we address those places where people think the issue starts. And part of the job is to work out if there is some support needed, what should that look like? Do people need to have guest speakers? Do they need to have a newsletter? Do they need to have a little glove box pocket ID guide that they can go and show to their neighbour? a lot of, I guess, our decisions around this would be based on what's bang for buck. So what does the job, but also what can be used in multiple ways. If you need to make one resource, but it needs to speak to, you know, multiple stakeholders, then how do we do that? How do we produce an item that won't go out of date quickly? How do we produce an item that can be used from, you know, WA border across to the Queensland border if we need to? So we will be trying to do things which probably go at the grassroots level, nothing too specific for people if it needs to talk to a lot of different areas. I do seem to spend a lot of time working with people on making their own property plans though. That seems to be something that is a gap. There's no, there's nothing out there that people seem to have at their fingertips that they can then turn into their own, you know, speaking for their own bit of turf, their own bit of land. So that's an area where I feel like I can't even keep up. There's nearly everybody wants to have somebody sit down with them and talk about how, you know, how are ferals impacting your area, where are the priorities, how are weeds impacting your area, where are the priorities. So a lot of things, because of, I guess, that kind of problem, a lot of things might happen in a group setting. We had a stall at the Ranger Forum last year on Cox Peninsula, so probably about 80 different rangers came through that 1 or 2 days where we were talking, in this case it was talking about biocontrol, so talking about alternate ways to manage weeds. Not everybody's keen on using herbicides, so just making people more aware of the process and the ecological balance that plants have in the environment and how you can use biocontrol to upset that balance and then make your weed less competitive. Just the concept of biocontrol was all we really wanted to get across. We're not saying you have to use biocontrol, but it's really around educating people so that they can go, oh, isn't biocontrol about the cane toad? And we're like, no, well, actually, it's all about, you know, plant-specific, host-specific relationships. So just dispelling some of the myths. That's all we probably achieved in that day and a half, but that's fine. That's a good starting point then for people to come and ask for more information or gets them talking about, well, could we do this? Would it work? Salvinia is a water weed which really can smother up a lot of billabongs and floodplain areas and creeks. That's something that has got, well, almost impossible to manage any other way because nobody wants to put a lot of herbicide onto water, but there's a little weevil that can be reared and can be collected and can manage the Salvinia weed, not by eating it all up, but by just eating enough to make the little floating fern lose its buoyancy and sink down into the water and then it drowns. So that kind of information is what we're trying to share with people, get them to understand, how does this work actually? It's all very well to say, go and manage your weeds, but think about why is that weed competitive and how can we make it less competitive? In the case of a floating weed, we could make it less competitive by taking away its buoyancy. Bingo, we've got a little beetle that does it. I'm open to anything because I think sometimes people can get to a stumbling block with their thinking and you really need to find a different way to present the information to unlock the ability to see an answer. On the right, it's actually a weed hygiene workshop and the rangers are looking under the car for seeds and rinsing it out. But at the same time, we're having lots of conversations around how do you behave when you've got weeds? Do you drive through weeds? Do you go around weeds? Do you organise work at different times of the year? So if I had just, you know, I guess stood in the lecture theatre and said all of that, I'm not sure how much would have sunk in, but if we actually got out there and we looked in the car and we got the hoses out and we sprayed and we washed and everybody got soaking wet, they won't forget it, I'm sure of it. On the left, there's the fire table. It's probably Rowan Fisher's one that he's done for the Nimble guys maybe, but it's really engaging. So the idea of it was to make a model of the landscape around the Boorman area and then project onto there how fire might move based on where's up and where's down and what's the direction and what's an, you know, like an imaginary wind speed that you're putting over that system. And you can see other people coming around. They're not people from Boorman. They're people going, wow, this could work for us. Do we want to get Rowan Fisher to come out and do this for us? Maybe. So it's definitely worth showing some of these other novel ways. People get to thinking, what would it look like if that was in our area? The bottom one is actually releasing little flea beetles for managing mimosa, which is a bad thorny weed on floodplains. And I've found that the biocontrol side of things, just getting people to handle beetles and look at them and how do they behave and have the conversation about what bit of that plant are they eating, is a really, really good engagement tool, because it makes people think about, why is that weed actually a problem? Is that weed a problem because, well, it's competitive? Could I make it less competitive because I could get the beetles to eat up the leaves, and then the light would shine through, and then the seeds on the ground would, you know, the native plants would actually grow back up again and then compete with any new seeds coming off the mimosa tree. So it's really great to be able to, I guess, get people out on their country with the hint of the solution there, and then they can see how they might be able to apply it. And then other things too, like sometimes to tell the story, to get the information that you need, or to get people to see whether the problem is being solved or not. Taking people up in the air just to look down and see if we're working at catchment scale, are we actually making a difference? We got Xavier from NLC to take some footage as we flew, and then straight away back at the homestead, put the footage up so people can see what we were doing. Now, again, they won't forget that you know, that day took place, that they got up in the chopper and we collected the footage, and then we sat down and we looked at the footage and we could see that's where that aerial spray treatment took place. That's the area where the biocontrol took place. They'll remember that, I'm pretty sure. Another thing, I guess, as new stuff comes to light, it's got to be shared. So it might be us, using media to share some of the stories, not just about problems, but also about solutions or good news stories as they come along as well. And that's, if we didn't do that, then things wouldn't be able to move as quickly. So you sometimes need to, I guess, draw on the media to share information in a way that makes its profile get risen, and then it raises up in people's on people's list of things to address, or it helps. I guess it can help with funding as well. Yeah, just again, the little flea beetle. Oh, sorry, those are the cider beetles, calligrapher cider beetles. Great for engaging, even with kids. You can see the different life stages on that particular plant, the little kind of grey bubbles, as well as the shiny beetle. Try to bring the information to people. So bring it to their area, bring it to their camp. The middle photo you can't see very well, but I think it's Jay Evans doing a presentation out, you know, like 2 hours drive into Jarwin country with his makeshift projector screen at the end of one of the days of the fire camp. So that's where, if there's going to be any questions asked or people are going to come forward with information, it's probably right there on their country. And if you've got people who are only interested in certain things, then just go with what they're interested in, because you don't always, we probably expect, I guess, that people are across many things, but that may not be the way. Some people might have a lot to do with fire, some people might have a lot to do with weeds, some people might have a lot to do with feral animals, some people might have a lot to do with a particular area, and that's how it is. So work with what you've got in that location at that point in time. And finally, this is to do with sharing stories and the successes of solving problems. And we have an awards night and an annual dinner, don't know if it's happening this year, where we recognise research, innovation, working together, collaboration, novel solutions, just good management of environment. Often people who have been working hard on things for a long time can feel like what they've learned they want to be able to share and show, and so this is part of that as well, being able to give the space where people can get together, talk to each other. Carla's been to one of those. How was your experience? Yeah. Yeah. So it's about telling the stories. And that's pretty much it. So thank you. Questions, go ahead.
Just wait until I get the microphone, that's the one. And then I will pass it on. Okay. Well, anybody's questions? Yeah, Eric. I'm going to.
Oh, hi Suzanne. I was just wondering if Territory NRM manages ocean assets as well, or?
It is in the, yes, so in the NRM plan, the coastal and water is regarded as an asset that needs protecting. In terms of having projects that are running in that space, at the moment, I would say no, and this is because our funding through our project stream is very federally based, and so the current land care phase is prioritising threatened species and World Heritage areas and assets that need protecting for their universal values and so on. So in other years, we've had a lot more to do with water.
Thank you.
Hey, Suzanne, I'm just thinking more on the students that might be listening to this talk now and later. What would be your suggestion, like if they want to engage, when they're doing a PhD or postgrad studies and they want to engage with the rural communities and the ranger groups, like, can you see how they can start that pathway, or you have any tips on how they should be doing that engagement or what they shouldn't be doing?
I think a starting point is that you do need to meet people in person. It's really hard for people to build a relationship if they can't see you. So the annual conference probably has been great in that regard, because most groups will come in maybe every second year, and so you can go up to them after their presentation and say, hey, that was great, like, I'm really interested to know more about what you're doing, or I've got this project, do you know of any groups who might be interested? And you've got to remember that in a lot of cases there are brothers and cousins and uncles and aunties working in different groups, knowing each other in different groups. So if there is something that somebody might be interested in, it may end up at the right place quicker than you think, or that information, that news about your project that you're trying to do, there will be somebody out there who probably is interested. You just need to find the right person. A lot of things are up to the capacity of a group, and coordinators do come and go. You might have coordinators who are really on board with your project, and in the period of your research, that coordinator might leave, and then that might leave you hanging as well. So the relationship needs to not just be with the coordinator, but with everybody, TOs, as much as you can. And as much as you can, it probably needs to be TO driven and ranger driven, and find out, what do they care about? You might be caring about this thing, they're caring about this thing. Are you talking about the same thing? And after you've had a conversation or two, you might find out yes or no. It might be that they care about it in this area, but not in this area, and you need to find that out. So it's always handy to have a map under your arm if you're ever going to talk to somebody, just so that you can start to, people switch on when they see a map, and they can start to see what you're talking about, where you're talking about, and they can tell you what where their area is, I think.
No, there's very, very valuable tips there, I think, for students thinking about that. I can see a lot of, some lessons I learned too, in a way. I'm opening also to questions for people on Zoom. If anybody would like to ask a question, you just unmute yourself and ask.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
I wanted to know, thank you for your presentation, it was great. Is it a two-way discussion? So do sometimes we get solutions from country that we then share with other traditional owners?
Yes, definitely. And some groups really find this, I think, very motivating. So learning from what their neighbours are doing, and also being very inviting about sharing their experiences back the other way. And I think that they really do understand everybody is in this together. It's not a competition. It's about really caring for this Mother Earth, or however they see it, and that if it's not done, everybody's got a role to play, and if we can't do it as efficiently as possible, it's going to be a lot harder.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, if we don't have any more questions, let's join me to say thank you to Susanne.